The 2012 Time Path, Part 2. My name is Daniel Vallis and welcome to our channel. So again, I want to emphasize, pay attention that Jupiter has a 12-year circuit and all the rare celestial signs that we have seen have been within this circuit. So now let's look more at the circuit, not so much the rare celestial signs which we've covered and many others have talked about, but let's look at the emphasis on time within this circuit. What are other things that the Lord has shown us that give us a better idea within this circuit of time? When we look at the year as we generally understand it, the Gregorian year, that is one solar calendar. When the sun goes along the circuit, then comes back to the same exact spot. So that is a celestial understanding of the heavens, a biblical understanding too, just watching the sun as it traces one celestial circuit. The sun will move again to the left. The sun will always move to the left along the line, moving down through the constellations: Sagittarius, Capricornus, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpius, and then Sagittarius again. Sirius will rise as a morning star somewhere around the beginning of August, typically though August 8th. That's why it's associated with 8 and 8, the 8th month, the 8th day, 88. And then it'll be tapering off, go off the scene about the first week of December. The dog days of summer start in the midst of July and go about to the end of August, the first few days of September. And that again marked by the rising of the bright and morning star, Sirius, which means coming quickly. That marks the peak of summer because that is the peak of the absolute hot time of the year. And because the heavens move like clockwork, Sirius will always rise at the same time and always be the bright and morning star during a very specific, known, and predictable time on the celestial clock. So these pictures that are referenced by Jesus in prophecy, the spring signs pointing to the arrival of summer, and then also the bright and morning star on the last page of the Bible, gives us important clues to look at that point toward this August window, which we are rapidly approaching. Understanding that this will happen every single year, so we will now look at multiple years with this understanding of what happens every single year. Let's look at the same progression along the line, going back from 2011 all the way to where we are now in 2023. This is going to be a little complicated, but we will try to review everything so you can best understand it. But again, you can see in all these years, the sun will always be moving in the same spot on the celestial clock, the same portrayals every single month, every single year. Sirius will always be rising at the same time. Dog days of summer are always at the same time too. So there are certain things we understand happen cyclically. The sun will move along its circuit once every year, but Jupiter will take 12 of these cycles to perform one circuit, one cycle. But it's moving through the same territory along the same line, which also has the same beginning and end as the sun, which is the vernal equinox, which happens in March. But we at least know from a solar perspective, the sun will come back to the same spot again, one solar year. So now that we know that Sirius rises in August and starts the dog days of summer at the middle of July, let's get that out of the way. So now let's look at Jupiter. Where has it been all these years? This visually marks out where Jupiter parked out and highlighted during that entire year. Don't pay attention to the month here, but just notice for each line, the highlighted portion on the constellation shows where Jupiter was traveling and staying, parking during that year. So in 2011, it started out in Pisces, then moved to the head of Aries, stayed there for the rest of the year at the head of Aries. Then in 2012, it was still at the head of Aries because remember, it was starting to move left, and so that's when it moved to the horns of Taurus and was staying there for a while in 2012. In 2013, went from Taurus to Gemini. 2014, went from Gemini to Cancer. 2015, parked between Cancer and Leo for most of the year and then started to move toward the hind legs. 2016, it was camped out at the hind leg for a while, and that's where it had opposition, shown brightest right at that hind leg. Then it moved into Virgo to start the pregnancy picture, moved into the side of Virgo at the end of 2016. And so for most of 2017, where was it camped out? Is camped out and parked right in the womb, acting out the pregnancy picture there, exiting, moving to the next constellation, but getting to that in 2018 when it really stayed in Libra and then started moving into Scorpius. 2019 really parked out there, then started moving to Sagittarius. So right at the beginning of 2020, Jupiter was moving from the Milky Way throne of God picture directly past The arm that is holding back the bow, camping out at Sagittarius, emphasizing the one who is holding back the bow, expecting to release it on his adversaries. Then 2021 camped out at Aquarius, and the Lord gave so much beautiful wisdom about his portrayals and his love. And in 2022, camped out at Pisces, pointing to the second part of the story. In 2023, Jupiter started out at the second fish in Pisces, but then has now moved into Aries, where it's going to be camped out again till March of 2024. So when you look back at 2011, all the way at the top there, you can see it's repeating the cycle. It has taken 12 years to creep through the different constellations, portraying and giving rare celestial signs and conjunctions with Jupiter and Saturn, and conjunctions with Venus as well too, multiple times. Multiple things that are highlighting this journey, major declarations that happened since 2011. Now we're coming back full circuit, literally to 2023, where it is now about to stand still. It has been 12 years, a number highly associated with time. One time circuit, 12 years. And even back in the days of Babylon, Daniel was an astronomer there in Babylon, the Magi were astronomers in Babylon. Jupiter is what they used to divide up the heavens into 12 constellations. So this whole concept of 12 is closely associated not just with time, but also the celestial clock. And that's why there's 12 hours in a day and all that too. They do go together. 12 hours and the celestial clock. And it was pegged toward Jupiter because they knew Jupiter takes 12 years. So it was a great way to just visually mark out the different constellations and divisions. And that is the ancient understanding that 12 was connected with time and the celestial clock. Still is. And so when we look at what the heavens are declaring, particularly Jupiter, which marks out those 12 years, marks out those circuits, and it's the king planet, and it's now pointing at the king Aries again, this all catches our attention. It's beautiful just to study all this because you can really start to see the clockwork of how the heavens move with such precision. You can see the handiwork of our Creator. And these mark out the different times when Jupiter was at opposition, when it shone brightest along these 12 years. And you'll remember in 2016, March 8th, that is when it was shining brightest right at the hindfoot in Leo the lion. That was so beautiful how the Lord showed his fulfillment of prophecy, the Shiloh prophecy. Shiloh is the Lamb of God, and that's how John the Baptist introduced him, the Lamb of God. Shiloh. He fulfilled the Shiloh promise. And so this is also important when we understand what happened in the different years when the Lord has brought us along our path, just like the wise men. The wise men were walking a physical path while they were watching a celestial path. And the celestial path was telling them signs, marking out and portraying the birth of the Messiah. And then it also portrayed the king planet in the arms of Virgo, right as the wise men were about to see down on their path the physical mother with the Messiah in her arms. They were seeing both what was on their path, but also the celestial path, because there were two signs happening concurrently. Remember, the virgin bringing forth the Messiah was a sign too, prophesied sign, but so was the scepter star. So there are two signs that happened when Jesus Christ was born. So that also means there's two signs that are associated as the sign of the Son of Man too. So just like the wise men, as we are watching the celestial path, we are also going to watch our path, because we are going to see things that our Redeemer is showing us on our path that will comport with the celestial path. And it should not surprise us. The more that we study it, we see how they line up on the entirety of Jupiter's path during this time circuit of 12 years. Particularly understanding that this is happening in context of the last generation. In 2011, Israel as a nation was 63 years old. In 2012, it was 64. It was not until 2018 that it reached 70 years old as a nation. And now in 2023, it is 75 years old, which catches a lot of people's attention because that is between 70, the average life, and then 80 on the high end, generally on the high end statistically. So again, that points to that 2023 is very important, right in that average window there. An expectation that, Jesus Christ said everything's going to happen within the last generation, within the last generation. Now, of course, he's saying the generation. Does a nation have generations? No. He's talking about the people. It's going to happen within their lifespan. So you got to look at the age of the people. And we've studied this several different times, but if you take the youngest that a witness could have been at the replanting of Israel, 1948, a 5-year-old, in 2011, he would have been 68 years old. 2012, he would have been 69, and in 2013, 70 years old. This is someone who would be the youngest that you would consider someone who would reliably remember the events of 1948. Once you get to about 4 years old, it gets really sketchy, but 5 years, yeah, they could remember that, particularly because of the tumultuous events that were going on in 1948 would definitely be burned into the memory of many people. But 5 years is a reliable age to really start considering them as reliable witnesses. So this really hedges our understanding when we consider now in 2023, they are 80 years old at the youngest. The youngest possible witness to Israel being replanted is already 80 years old this year, the same year that Jupiter is coming back to the Lamb. 80 years old. If we consider a 6-year-old, their memory would be a little bit better, they would be hitting 70 years old in 2012. And they would have hit 80 in 2022. A 7-year-old would have been 70 in 2011 and 80 in 2021. Now, of course, we don't know specifically, but just when you look at that relatively safe assumption of an age to be a relatively reliable witness, 5 to 7 years old, you can see a median age there. The last generation was hitting 70 years old at the youngest, somewhere around 2011 and 2012. 70 years old. And between 2020 and 2023, they were hitting 80 years old, and we definitely know where we're at now. They are definitely 80 years old at the youngest. So this would catch our attention considering the 12-year cycle again. Because when we look back at what would have been the start of this circuit, that is when the last generation would have been reaching 70. Where if we had been thinking about it at that time, we would have had the assumption to be sober to start watching for prophetic events coming together in 2011, and 2012. Shouldn't we? When Jupiter the King was pointing at Aries, it wasn't doing anything abnormal that would really draw our attention celestially to it, but we were watching what we were told to watch, which was the last generation. So those who were watching the prophetic time clock, which was the generation, the living clock, in 2011, 2012, they should have been very sober that we are running out of time. We are running out of time. Then in 2014, 2015 is when the blood moons appeared in April and October and September 2014, 2015. Rare instance of the tetrad starting again within the lifespan of the last generation. And so again, this should catch our attention when we see the median age when they were hitting 70. Then just about the next year or so, rare celestial events are starting, which we are told, look up, lift up your heads, pegged to what? The last generation. And so it should start to sober us that we're starting to see some patterns here with this circuit of 12, marked out by the king. Because we also heard in 2014 as when the 2 cows with 7 on their head were born in late September. And many were seeing that as a sign that the tribulation was about to start too. 7 good years and 7 bad years. Understanding also from understanding in Jasher that the 7 good years did not start till the 2nd year of Joseph's reign. So there was a time delay of at the most 2 years because it happened within his 2nd year. So when we consider 2 full agricultural seasons from the birth of those cows, which many take as prophetic because they are unique, they stand out, and they are seen on our path. We see the celestial path. We see the biological clock of the last generation down on our path. So these cows are also something that you could say are down on our path. They happen within our lifespan, down on where we walk, our everyday life. And so that caught a lot of people's attention. So you go forward 2 agricultural seasons, which would bring you to, at the latest, the fall equinox in September of 2016, which starts 7 good years, which means that would be ending at the latest in September 2023, this year, which those cows are associated with. After the 7 good years comes 7 bad years. So again, there's a lot that's very suspicious when we see the timing of what's on our path with the celestial path and the biological clock. of the last generation. We also saw in 2015 the Star of Bethlehem signs, the parallels with what the wise men saw. We studied that a lot, have our poster on it. Rare celestial conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, the closest they had been in 2,000 years at Leo. They have conjunctions everywhere else too, but this was the first time they had it that close in Leo, first time in 2,000 years. And again in 2015, you can see that Jupiter is camped out mostly at the head of the Leo the Lion. That's where the Star of Bethlehem took place, right near the head. Then it started to move toward the feet. There was another instance that paralleled the Star of Bethlehem too, and then it shone bright at the hind foot of Leo the Lion right at March 2016. So you can see the progression of where Jupiter is with what we saw. And you can also start to see how this isn't slowly ramping up, it's quickly ramping up. Quickly ramping up. As soon as the last generation hit a median age of 70, at the minimum, absolute minimum that you could extend it out to, as soon as it hits 70, you have celestial signs, you have signs down on the earth, you have Star Bethlehem signs, which remind us of the exact sign which was seen when he came the first time. Quickly happening on the celestial clock with the king planet. And this cycle started when it's pointing to the Lamb of God who came the first time. We also noticed, though, back in 2012 at the London Olympics, that the enemy was pointing, they know something about time. They also pointed and reenacted the Antichrist coming up out of the bottomless pit, the demons coming up out of the bottomless pit too. They reenacted a lot their understanding of Revelation 9:11 relating to time and everything stopping, a pandemonium, celebrating the arrival of their phoenix figure, the events ending on August 12th, time number again, in 2012, a year that also signals time, but also within a circuit that has just started on the celestial clock. Multiple clocks being pointed to here. And so here in 2023, we are about to reach the 11th anniversary of those events in 2012. When they reenacted Revelation 9:11, the beast coming up out of the bottomless pit. Right in August, which is near the rising of Sirius, the bright and morning star. So it's going to hit the 11th anniversary of that, right when we've finished the 8th anniversary of the Star of Bethlehem events, which means it's in the 9th year, or it's 8+ years now. So when you look on the multiple clocks, we're in the 9th year, approaching an 11th year, a 9 and 11. It just caught my attention that goes exactly with the expectation now too. The bottomless pit is about to be opened as soon as the restrainer is moved out of the way. The enemy seems to understand the clock and the timing of all this coming together. And of course they would, because they can synchronize and cue up the peace and safety calls about what? The coming sudden destruction. But in addition to the blood moons, the 7 cows, and the Star of Bethlehem events, we also noticed total solar eclipses that were very unique. Some happening at the North Pole and then the South Pole. International signs. We also saw the one that happened right at Regulus, right close to the Revelation 12 sign. This whole time circuit has been filled with rare celestial signs that have been calling to the world, look up. The entire world, from the North Pole to the South Pole, look up. And these weren't just any total solar eclipses happening at random places. They were happening at Regulus the Prince. And then also the ones in 2020 and 2021, both of them happened at the feet of Ophiuchus, who is standing on Scorpius, right when Jupiter the King is pointing at Sagittarius, the one who's holding back the bow that's pointed at Scorpius. All of this choreography and handiwork is showing the same message. He is about to start making his enemies his footstool. And this is shown by the greater light and the lesser light that travel along the line. One rules the day, one rules the night. The stars that rule the night, with Jupiter the King, all of them together are telling the same story. Pointing to the same story in this time circuit of 12 years. All of them. And then just a few days after the solar eclipse at one of the feet was a great conjunction where Jupiter the King conjuncted with Saturn, reminding us of time. We are running out of time. He is about to do what he's just portraying, what the heavens just declared is about to come next. He's about to make his enemies his footstool, which means he's about to let go of the arrow. Many things are about to be released. Redeem the time. You are running out of time. Time again being 12. And who is going to be releasing the judgments? It's going to be the Lamb of God. And this time circuit of 12, right when the last generation was reaching 70, is now 12 years later, also coming when they're at a median age of 80. Right when we have the celestial heavens declaring time is about up. We've also seen that the enemy has this understanding too. In 2020, they marked out the doomsday clock with the calls of peace and safety timing there too, moving the clock the closest it has been to midnight with 100 seconds to midnight, and 100 and 100. And now in 23, they moved it to the closest it has been during the entire last generation, 90 seconds to midnight. Right in this year when Israel's 75, the median age is 80. Ending this circuit, Aries, about to stand still at the Lamb of God, who we are expecting to open up the seals and release judgment, the sudden destruction that is coming. Right when their doomsday clock signals out 9-11, 9-1-1 in reverse to those who watch their messaging. The enemy is aware of the clock that is in play and that time is involved. 2020 is also when the corona came onto the scene because the celestial clock, Jupiter the king, was pointing at the crown, which is right at Sagittarius. Jupiter the king planet that rules the night was right there. Right when they put into all the effects their corona crown, because they were aware of the crown that was pointing on the clock. And our king is watching us whether we're going to lose our crown. Are we holding fast to his word? For the past 4 years, he's been watching us. Our king has been watching us. Are we fruitful? So much that we should be considering that we've covered. The peace and safety calls started going out in 2015. Late 2015, you remember November when the Paris peace attacks and then the Pepsi commercial about peace and then UN Security Council warnings, and Vatican was also talking about the world doesn't have peace. And there were multiple things that just went out in a quick bevy of just a few days all of a sudden at the end of 2015. Right in context, though, you could see what was going on. The blood moon, the star of Bethlehem, the 7 cows, so much had gone into effect ringing out. The total solar eclipse warning, the international sign. They know we're running out of time. And their calls of peace and safety are pegged to the clock. They're queued up already. They already know that we're running out of time. And of course, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign, very pivotal time marker, a star date marker, that by reading the book of Revelation, you can tell exactly to the day when that celestial event will take place. And it appears to be the midst of the tribulation events, which is very important. We've talked about this prior to the sign and then after, that when the time snare is reset and time starts looping, it will go back prior to 2012. And like Jesus emphasizes in Matthew 24, the world will see the sign of the Son of Man during the midst of the tribulation. After the snare has been engaged, and about the time that it needs to be shortened, time will be shortened, the Revelation 12 sign will be seen. So this is also very important too, because it is a star date. We can fix exactly on a clock when that is going to happen. And so when we know when that is going to happen, we can go forward 1,260 days that those who flee into the wilderness will be protected there in Israel. That only applies to Israel there. We have a pretty good idea that those days are solid, very close to that, because that is when Satan has lost the war in heaven. He knows his time is short. He can't play with time anymore. He can't extend it anymore. Time has been shortened at that point. So it strongly appears prophetically that in the future, those days will be the final last half of the tribulation. But everything prior to that is a little bit up in the air. If you just do a standard counting backwards 1,260 days where the 2 witnesses will testify during that time, that would bring you back to April 12th of 2014, 2 days before the blood moon start. So that is eyebrow raising too. If time resets, they're going to see all these celestial signs again, which they should have been paying attention to the first time. But Jesus in Matthew 24, he doesn't say the Revelation 12 sign, does it? He says they will see the sign of the Son of Man. And technically, those were 2 signs. It was the virgin giving birth, but also the scepter star, which was the Star of Bethlehem sign. So we've talked about this several times. if you count 1,260 days back from the Star of Bethlehem, because Jesus Christ said they would see that again too, he's implying they would see that again, that will bring you back to the beginning of 2012, right around January 17th, which should definitely raise your eyebrows when you consider some of the things that we've seen with the messaging going on in 2012, that the enemy put out relating to time, and the Antichrist coming up out of the bottomless pit, 9/11. We can't state 100%, but everything we have seen leads us to believe that time will reset somewhere to at the very beginning of 2012 or late 2011, at the earliest 2012, because of the implication Jesus Christ said they will see the sign of the Son of Man, which would cover both of those. And in context, he's saying it's going to happen near the midst, near the abomination of desolation. So you have to back up 1,260 days from the Star of Bethlehem. And we have speculated that if they loop time back to the beginning of 2012, and if they keep looping that to avoid coming to the Revelation 12 star date, which signals when Satan's time is up, that's what he wants to avoid. He wants to avoid that. And apparently they're already avoiding that with time manipulation, shenanigans with the Mandela effect. We've talked about that. But ultimately he wants to avoid the real Revelation 12 star date, because that's when it's all over for him. That's when his probation ends. So, if they are looping a certain set of time and Christ says he's going to shorten time, the days will be shortened when they reach that point. But they will see both the signs. It's my speculation that he's going to cut out that portion of time between those two signs, so they will see the beginning, the Star of Bethlehem, and then also come out at the Revelation 12 sign. Or before that, maybe see the pregnancy too, because that's important. But there is an implication that a chunk of time will be missing, because if he kept going at the rate that he's going, there would be no flesh saved. And if you count the statistics that Jesus Christ gives in the book of Revelation, 50% is killed by the midst. There's a quarter of the world's population killed, and then a third of the world's population killed. A third of what's left, which would be 25% of the previous amount. And so that's 50% right there. And so if you keep going at that percentage, another 1,260 days, you would come to 100%. So you have to take out a chunk of that time, because it appears the death rate is actually going to increase in the second half. So you have to take out a significant, noticeable chunk of time, shorten it, cut it out. And so that's a speculation of how it's going to go. But we can see, based on what Jesus Christ said, they will see around the midst the sign of the Son of Man, and understand there is time, prophetic events of the two witnesses prior to that. We can see why the enemy keeps pointing back and looking at 2012, and why they seem to have put out a lot of messaging then that the end of the world is going to come in 2012. Well, friends, that's all the time we have for today, but stay tuned till next time, where we're going to dive deeper into some of the things the Lord has shown us on our path over this circuit. Maranatha.